There's also the emotional intelligence of being man, and that is not being a crybaby, not
Yep.
complaining,
Hmm.
not making excuses, not blaming other people, having confidence, getting things done, not
Yep.
asking for a cookie every time you do something good, not looking for pats on the back. This is kind of the confidence and the emotional intelligence of a well-adjusted man. But if you're addicted to porn and
Mm.
alcohol and that stuff, your mind can't develop to be that.
For sure. And I think that's a good segue, because one of the other things I found in my book that people are concerned with is the term that I use that's called effeminacy. And listen, I can't control how people define different words in the English language. I mean, let's just think of a word like the word goof. Like if
Goof,
I say
yeah,
you're being a goof,
yeah.
in Canada, probably the States, it's kind of just like an insult for saying that somebody's being dumb. In England, and at least from talking to friends from England and friends from Ireland, it's actually in parts of the UK and the British Isles in general used to say that somebody is a sexual predator. And the same thing with the word pride. If I say to my son, I'm proud of my son,
Mm.
I'm not saying I'm happy that you have demonstrated the capital vice of pride as per like the original sin.
Right,
It's just I'm humbled by your accomplishments. I'm honored that how hard you work. We know that we use words differently. Okay.
correct.
So as far as the word effeminacy, St. Thomas Aquinas defines it. I believe it's in Secunda, question 138. Essentially, it's a reluctance to suffer due to an attachment to pleasure. It's a reluctance to suffer due to an attachment to pleasure. There are other ways that people have used the word effeminacy, and that's fine. People can, like I said, but in my book, I talk about effeminacy as being the reluctance to suffer due to attachment to pleasure, and that's the framework that I talk about. So I was thinking earlier, yes, there are the big ticket items, addictions, infidelity. Like there's all those sorts of effeminate things because really what those are is there are things that are pleasurable, but they're unlawful and they're going to hurt you and your family. But you do them anyway because you're not willing to suffer the loss of something you want to do for your own pleasure. I saw this guy a few months ago. I hadn't seen him in a decade or something. I knew him from growing up, and he's a lawyer now, and he's working in Toronto, and I live about 2 hours away from Toronto. So sometimes what people will do is they won't commute because it's a little too far, but they'll stay in the big city for a week and come home and see their kids on the weekend or whatever. It's
Mm.
a common thing. I get it, and some people have different situations. I understand that, but he's a lawyer, and I know you can make a good living as a lawyer anywhere. Okay, we don't live in like an impoverished third world nation in Canada. You can be the wealthiest man in town, having a small practice in a regular town. And we were talking, and the guy just seemed so unhappy. He just got married, had a kid. I told him I had 4 kids that were 4 years old and under. He looked at me like I was a crazy person, which I kind of am. And but he looked so unhappy, and he's like, "Well, I got to work in Toronto because I'll get twice the money, so we can buy twice the house." And I see my kid on the weekend, and I'll put 5 or 10 years, and I'll make a name for myself, and then I'll sell my client book or whatever, and I'll come here, and I'm thinking, you're willing to give up 5 to 10 years of being around your child to have twice the money. And once again, he wasn't impoverished. It was like, I want twice the money to have twice the house. Even that, we wouldn't look at that and say that's like the Lamar Odom example. But what we have there is a guy who is so attached to the material pleasures, to the prestige, to the name, to the reputation. So I'm a lawyer at a big firm in Toronto, that he's willing to forego the formative years of raising his own children in order to materially provide for them, but not provide what is most important, which is the moral and spiritual formation. And that is an example of our reluctance to suffer due to an attachment to pleasure,
Yes.
which is how effeminacy is defined as per Thomas Aquinas and in my book.
So what do we say to men? A lot of guys. I talk to a lot of young guys, talking 18 to 29, getting into 30.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys didn't have dads. A
Hmm.
lot of them had, their parents divorced young, and then he had stepdad one, and then he had stepdad two. They have no attachment or guidance or even a relationship with anyone who they would call their dad.
Hmm.
And so, they've been, since they're, teenagers are watching porn and video games and anime and just kind of a big mess. And then
Hmm.
they have a conversion.
Right.
But, as Thomas Aquinas says, grace builds on nature.
Yes.
It's not like you get baptized or you get confirmed and then all of a sudden, you're
Yep.
just this Saint Joseph upon the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are some practical things that we can give to these young men who know they're lacking? They're like, look,
Right.
I didn't have this. And
Right.
it's not their fault.
We can't just be spiritualists
Right.
where I pray 20 rosaries. And Matt Fradd talks about this in his research on pornography. People will email him and say, I've done 20 rosaries. Why am I still, And he says, listen, you got to go for a run. You got to go lift some weights. So
Yeah.
I have this chapter on
Jump
Tame
in
the
a cold
Horse.
pool, swim across the lake.
St. Francis of Assisi said that.
Look, I mean, physical exercise changes the way you think. It's fact.
Yes.
Facts. Hashtag facts. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. And also our body and we're not Albigensians. We're not dualists.
Thank you.
We believe that the body was ordained to be good. And we believe that the soul is the form of the body.
Yes.
And that your body is a unique body and your soul is a unique soul made only for your body. Okay. Which means if you're going to have cohesion in your spiritual life between body and soul, you have to tame the horse. You have to break in your body in order that it will do what is necessary and be subject to the needs of your soul so that you can achieve great heights in the spiritual life and in the moral life. So this is why we fast. Yeah. There's a reason why when Christ, there's probably, I'm sure some exorcists and stuff could say other reasons, but one of the reasons why Christ says fasting gets out certain devils is because fasting makes you weak. And the weaker you are, the more you have to depend on God. Mm-hmm. So if you get to the point where you are just like, you've done fasting, I've done some, and it's like 4 PM and you're just like, you want to pass out, fall asleep, doesn't matter how much coffee you drink. You are sitting there going, God, I got nothing left, take over. And that's a great, the devil hates humility, and subjugating your body and recognizing how weak you are, it forces you to be humble. Right. And that's why and that will, in the face of pornography, in the face of alcohol addiction, in the face of video game addiction, all these things, even just being soft and not doing what you're supposed to do, you will have command over your pleasures in order to do what is right.
One of the people in the live chat, his name is Nate Noble, put his comment on the screen. He says, my dad left, and what helped me leave the effeminate life was exercise and doing hard things. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what you just said. We must do things that we do not want to do, because effeminacy is softness.
That's what it means.
It's softness. And that is so repulsive in the eyes of women when they look at men and see that softness, the aversion to do hard things. This is what being a father ultimately is.
Yeah.
It's 2 kids have stubbed their toes, and you have to pick up both kids and comfort them.
Yeah.
They were riding their scooters and they ran into each other.
Oh, goodness.
And knocked their heads. And your wife's having a bad day and she needs comfort. All of these things happen. There's a great, a Catholic man, I believe he had 10 kids. He said the moment for the modern man, for the modern father, you're coming home from work, let's just say an average time is 5:34 p.m. You pull into the back, you get out of the car, and you reach for the back doorknob.
Yeah.
He said that is the moment of testing, because you worked all day. You did your job. Now you're moving into the domestic realm, which is a hard transition for a lot of men.
Yeah.
A lot of men just go to the bar and drink for an hour and then go home. But you grab the doorknob and you turn it, and your wife could be there in a dress, honey, and your favorite meal could be on the stove, and the kids could be daddy, which happens sometimes, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Or there could be broken glass on the ground and a kid crying and your wife in tears. You don't know.
You don't know.
But you have to put your hand on the doorknob and say, here we go, Jesus, and turn the knob and be the man, whatever it is.
Man, I walk in my house and I got 4 kids who are 4 years old and under. My wife could be literally breastfeeding the one child, and the 3 kids are having a shouting match, and there's a plate on the floor, and someone just cut the other guy's forehead with his teeth because they were wrestling, and it's like, I'm not even going to get my suit jacket off for 2 hours, and then eventually after supper, I'm going to go, whew, time for bedtime, and then back into it, and that's just part of being a dad.
But I also want to, because I don't want people to hear us complaining and all that. There are moments. And I think if you run your home properly, there are moments of the glory where you turn the
Yeah.
doorknob and Joy is there smiling and there's a great
Yeah.
meal and the kids are finishing up some homework or homeschool and they say, Dad, you want to go outside and play or let's go
Yeah.
throw the ball. I mean, those moments, and it's those moments where you put in a full day and you come home and the domestic situation is working, it's
Hmm.
going well, and you're like, man, love being married.
Yes. It's the
Matrimony
best.
is awesome. I
Yeah.
love having a lot of kids. So I don't want to hear. I mean, I don't want you to hear us if you're a
Right.
23-year-old man who's thinking about jumping into this. I'm going to be a Catholic dad with 6 kids. I don't want you to hear that it's always just broken teeth and split heads and
No.
crying wives. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that if that happens, you can't come home and be like, "Oh, come on, I just been working all day. What's
Yeah.
wrong?" You know what I mean? Like you still.
Yeah.
We're just saying that you have to be uh, truly masculine to just
Yes.
step up and make everything better.
Right. You're right. 100%.